Hey, fifth graders, welcome back to another excerpt from Nowhere Boy. When we left off last time, Max has agreed to help Ahmed. He got in a fight at school, and Farah actually stood up for him, and then others jumped in too. It kind of shows you the power of sometimes you just need one friend, and then others jump in too. So Ahmed has decided to stay. Max chose not to tell his family, and that was one of my questions to you, was why not? And so he has agreed to help Ahmed. So let's see what happens next. Chapter 18. The next day was Friday the 13th of November. Ooh, do you believe in that superstition that bad things happen on Friday the 13th? Let's see if anything happens to the boys. But it wasn't until that horrible evening, that Max even noticed the unlucky date. As soon as he got home from school, he went to work. First, he looked through his books and comics, trying to pick a couple of perfect ones for Med. Aquaman Volume 3, The Throne of Atlantis, was an obvious choice. But he had a hard time choosing the second book. He had the idea it should be a subject Ahmed could relate to, but uplifting as well. Anne Frank's diary didn't end well, so he nixed that. That's a good decision. What would you pick, fifth graders? You can share in the comments. Dead parents were another subject he wanted to avoid, but almost every fantasy book seemed to start with a dead parent. And so he went backward in time through his bookshelf till he found one of the first books he'd ever read by himself. It was called Boy Heroes of the War Between the States, and it had been written in the 1950s. Max had gone through a huge Civil War phase in third grade. His father had remembered enjoying boy heroes himself as a boy and had found Max an old water-stained copy on eBay. A few of the stories were sad, but there were triumphant ones too, ones that showed that kids could be as courageous as adults. The book had made a deep impression on Max. After sliding the book and comic into a tote bag, he went through his dad's old clothes and found a pair of pajamas he had never seen him wear and that his father was unlikely to miss. He added a spare toothbrush never used and a travel-sized tube of toothpaste. I like that he picked a book that shows the resilience of kids. Well done, Max. Just as he had hoped, his parents went to bed early, as they usually did on Fridays, exhausted by the week. In another stroke of luck, Claire went to sleep early too, complaining of a sore throat. At 10:30, he crept down to his parents' bedroom and peeked in. The only light emanated from his father's phone, which blinked on with messages or news alerts. He had clearly forgotten to switch it to Do Not Disturb. He was a heavy sleeper, though. There was no light at all coming from beneath Claire's door. Max became aware of soft footsteps in the hall below. The front door creaked. Max raced down the stairs and was about to whisper his name when Claire lurched around. Oh, that little buster. Her long blonde hair swinging after her, and stared at him. She was in her coat, wearing eyeliner and lipstick, and holding a small beaded purse in her gloved hand. Don't tell me she's going to that party they said no to. Don't you dare tell Mom and Dad, she hissed. I'll kill you. Then she quietly closed the door behind her. Max stood frozen in place, his heart still pounding. Had she wondered what he was doing, coming down late at night, carrying a tote bag? But then he realized that she was only thinking about herself and whether he would tell. She was sneaking out to the party, of course. His parents had never agreed to let her go. A small part of him was tempted to tell. How refreshing it would be for her not to be Miss Perfect anymore. But then his parents would go after Claire and be up half the night fighting with her, and he wouldn't be able to visit Ahmed. Plus, for a long time after, his parents would be on the lookout for anyone sneaking around at night. It was better anyway to have her owe him a favor than to start a war. As he fixed Ahmed a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in the kitchen, yum, Max laughed softly to himself. How many secrets were there in this house? How many kids wandering around at night? He almost felt sorry for his parents, unaware of the crazy hidden universe around them. His mood was buoyant when he knocked on the little door. It seemed contagious, too, because when the door opened, Ahmed smiled. Max held open the tote bag. Bananas, peanut butter and jelly, 2 books. But before he could finish, he heard his mother's voice from upstairs. Oh, my God! Oh, no. Oh no. The smile dropped off Ahmed's face. Any guesses, fifth graders? Max shoved the tote into his hand. By the time he was back in the hall, Ahmed had already closed the cellar door behind him. Max tiptoed up the basement stairs, his stomach clenched. Had something happened to Claire? He pictured her mugged and beaten. He snapped himself out of these dark thoughts. She had left barely 10 minutes earlier. It wasn't very likely she was in trouble already. That is, unless she was in a different type of trouble. His mother was fully capable of a cry like that over something simple, over simply finding Claire missing from this time, not even bothering to mute his footsteps. What happened? He said, bursting into his parents' room. They were both sitting up, the light on, looking at their phones. Quiet, whispered his mother. You're going to wake Claire. Max let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Whatever was happening had nothing to do with her. You're the one who shouted, his father said to her. Well, you're the one who left your phone on. What happened? Max interrupted. There are terror attacks happening in Paris, his father said, in a bunch of places. They're holding hostages at a concert hall. God, all those kids, his mother said. What kind of terrorists? Max asked. Muslims, one, his mom said. They were shouting, God is great. Max felt like he couldn't breathe. What if Ahmed was sympathetic to terrorists? What if he was helping them? Now, from what we know about Ahmed, does that seem possible, fifth graders? Not that Max knows everything we know. We know a lot more about Ahmed than Max. Max, are you okay? His mom asked. Most Muslims aren't terrorists, he murmured. Of course not. She hesitated, seemed to choose her words carefully. They're peaceful, decent people, like that girl at school. Farah. Right, Farah. His mother smiled as if the thought of Farah made her happy before her expression turned serious again. I'm glad she thought of her. But Islamic extremism is also a real problem. It's actually, fifth grader, it's any religion that is extreme is a problem like that, when it's used like that as a weapon. And not just in Europe, his dad added, in the Middle East and Asia too. His mother's voice started rising. These were innocent people just going to a concert. You're going to wake up Claire, his father said. Claire. Max had to warn her. What were the chances his mother would check on her? She was upset. People were being killed. At some point, his mother would want to peek in as she slept. Where were you anyway? His mother asked. Max held up the banana. Getting a snack. I gotta pee. Be right back. Look at this, his mom said, holding her phone out to his dad. Max ran upstairs, grabbed his phone, and started typing as fast as he could. Mom, Dad, up. Terror attack. Paris. Get home before MD realize you're gone. So he types that to his sister. He hit send. Then he ran back down to his parents' room. They were both still glued to their phones. Any more news, he asked. The police haven't gone into the Bataclan yet, said his dad. The terrorist must have suicide. Fear in his mother's eyes as she scanned her phone, frightened Max. It was horrible to imagine the people trapped inside the theater, not knowing whether these very moments would be their last. Max tried not to think about it. He focused instead on keeping his parents talking so they wouldn't get up and check for Claire. At last his phone vibrated. Front door. I'll be right back, he said. Neither of them said anything. His mother looked like she was about to cry over what she was reading on her phone. Max ran downstairs and opened the door. Claire slipped past him. She had somehow managed to wipe off all her makeup. She kicked off her shoes and hung up her coat, then peeled off her jeans and stuffed them into the bottom of the bin of hats and scarves. Only then did she stop to look at Max, not with a scowl, but with a look that was calm and clear-eyed. He felt like it was the first time since they'd moved to Brussels that she really saw him. Thanks, she mouthed. Then she waved him upstairs, tiptoeing behind him while he stomped heavily. What are you doing, Max? His mother said in a loud whisper. You're going to wake up Claire. Claire ducked in front of him through the door to his parents' bedroom, yawning. Too late. He already did. I was checking to make sure the door was locked, Max said, following behind her. What happened? Claire asked, rubbing her eyes as if she'd just woken up. Ooh. She's good, fifth graders, and I don't like it. Only if Max looked closely could he see the smeared gray makeup near the creases. Terrorist attacks in Paris, said his dad. As Claire sat down beside their mother, Max's dad moved over and patted the empty space next to him. Max walked to his side of the bed and sat down. His fear melted into shame. How could he even think, even for a second, that Ahmed was involved in anything like this? True, he was Muslim, but he talked about charity, not violence. He had been nothing but gentle. Don't worry, Max, his father said. No one's going to hurt you. This is happening in Paris, okay? You're safe here. His mother wrapped her arms around Claire and kissed her hair. His father put an arm around him, but all Max could think about was Ahmed, sitting alone in the wine cellar, with no one to tell him he was safe. I wonder when the last time Ahmed felt safe, fifth graders. Chapter 19. It wasn't until late the next night that Ahmed heard the gentle tap on his door. In the 24 plus hours since Max's mother had shouted and Max had rushed away, Ahmed had stayed inside the cellar, not even leaving to use the bathroom, leaving himself in the bucket instead. It's getting a little chilly out here. To pass the time, Ahmed looked at the books Max brought him. It was easy enough to follow the Aquaman comic. The pictures helped. There was Aquaman on the throne of Atlantis. There he was leaving to join the Justice League. There was the evil Lord Orm holding the world at ransom and stealing away Aquaman's throne. The other book had more words with a few photographs. It seemed to be about boys at war a long time ago, but Ahmed's English wasn't good enough to understand it, and he didn't like the photos of the boys holding rifles bigger than they were, or weighed down by large drums. There was a haunted look in their eyes of weariness and resignation that he recognized. Because fifth graders, of course, Max does know about war. Maybe this is too close to home. Maybe he shouldn't be reading this book. Let's see. As soon as he heard the knock, Ahmed hurried to the door. He felt bad for not wearing the pajamas Max had given him, but at any moment, he still expected to have to flee, and it seemed ridiculous to run through the city in pajamas. But Max didn't seem to notice. He entered quietly, carrying a tote bag and a small cooler. What happened? Ahmed asked. Max didn't quite look him in the eye. There are a bunch of terrorist attacks in Paris. How many people killed? More than 100. Max didn't say anything more, but Ahmed understood everything. The terrorists were most likely Islamic State, trained in Syria. Some of them had likely gone back and forth from Turkey to Europe and might have even pretended to be refugees. They probably seemed a lot like him. Young men without documents traveling alone. Very bad, he said. Max nodded, but he didn't seem to want to discuss it further. He held up the cooler. I brought you some other things to eat, he said. Yogurt, veggies, no meat. Also some more books. Thank you, Ahmed said. As he led Max back into the wine cellar, he allowed his thoughts to reach their inevitable conclusion. The Europeans would blame the refugees. It didn't matter that many of them were fleeing Islamic states themselves. They were all Muslims. To the Europeans, they were all the same. He needed to make it clear to Max that he had nothing to do with this. And fifth graders, it's dangerous any time you generalize and stereotype a whole people for the deeds of a few, right? But Max he was fleeing the war. So he is not, and all the refugees were also fleeing that war. So what does that tell you? Did you like the first books? Max asked. I like Lord Orm, Ahmed said. Too late, he realized how it might sound to Max that he liked the villain. Not like, he is bad. No, Max said, seeming to understand. He's Aquaman's half-brother. Did you know that? Ahmed shook his head. They had the same dad, but Lord Orm is completely human. Human? Ahmed repeated, not sure of the word. Like, Max paused. Like, not magical. Ordinary, like us. Ahmed shook his head. But I not like Lord Orm. I not like this bad man in Paris. Stop, Max said, holding up his hand. I know. His face was slightly red, as if the conversation embarrassed him. But Ahmed wondered if he was also embarrassed, because these fears and doubts had crossed his mind. Did you read the other book? Max asked. A little, Ahmed said, mainly not to sound rude. Sounds like this is actually easier to talk about than what's happening in Paris. I was a slow reader, Max explained. My sister Claire read the first 4 Harry Potters in first grade, and everyone was worried because I still wasn't reading chapter books in third. But then I got this book, and I don't know, I liked it. Ahmed didn't follow. Afraid Max would expect a reply, he decided to tell the truth. That book too hard. I cannot read. Oh, Max said, his cheeks coloring as if he was the one admitting this. Your English is really good, though. Where did you learn it? My father. The word hurt to speak. Oh, it hurts him to say that word, father. He spoke it well? He was English teacher. What happened to him? Oh, geez. Ahmed glanced at the picture of the man with the cage body balanced atop the cliff overlooking the sea. He felt exactly like this man, on the brink of a precipice. He was sure that if he answered, he would topple into the sea. You teach me better English, he asked instead, so I read this book? He can't talk about his dad. Max looked surprised. Then his eyes crinkled with a smile. Sure, we can read it together. I'll bring you a dictionary, too, so you can look up words and see what they mean. In the meantime, you can check out these others. This one is about the boys who invented Superman. You know who he is, right? The superhero from another planet? Ahmed lifted one fist to the sky. Nabil Fawzi. Max shook his head. Who? This is his name when he just working guy. You mean Clark Kent? No, Clark Kent in Arabic. No, Clark Kent in Arabic, Nabil Fawzi. It's a bird, it's a plane, it's Nabil Fawzi? Max fell over sideways, laughing. Maybe in Arabic it's got a ring to it. Ahmed realized he was laughing too. He tackled Max and pinned him to the floor. Okay, Max cried. Nabi Fonzie. Nibble Fuzzy. When Ahmed finally sat up and released Max, his stomach ached from laughing. That must feel good, right, 5th graders? What else you bring me? He asked in his most imperious voice. I hereby present, Max took the next book from the bag with a flourish, The Calculus Affair, one of the better Tintins, or as you call him in Arabic, Tintin? You sure it's not Abdul or something? Ahmed gave him a playful shove. Max placed the book on Ahmed's head, then took out one more. And last but not least, my dear, considerate parents gave me this one before they announced they were forcing me to move here. No words, just pictures. It's about this man who arrives in a new city alone. Ahmed smiled. Brussels? It's not a real city, though. I suppose it's more like New York. Where you live? No, I'm from Washington, D.C. It's like Brussels? Max laughed. No way. Doesn't rain all the time, for one thing, and people are friendlier, at least most of them. Here, I'll show you some photos. Ahmed hunched over Max's phone as Max scrolled through the pictures of his friends and silly selfies. Even though Max's house and neighborhood looked fancier, his real life didn't seem that much different from Ahmed's before the war, hanging out with his cousins and goofing around. You have any photos of your family? Max asked. Ahmed shook his head. They'd all been on his phone. Sorry, 5th graders, my sprinklers just came on and it kind of threw me. Let me read that again. I lost my train of thought. You have any photos of your family? Max asked. Ahmed shook his head. They'd all been on his phone. That is so sad, 5th graders, to lose that phone. Max paused on a photo of 2 boys perched on their bikes. Kids with backpacks were streaming out of a building behind them. This your school? Ahmed asked. Yep. Ahmed's stomach clenched with longing. He glanced over at Max, surprised to find him staring at the photo with equal intensity. That's Kevin and Malik, and the bike I destroyed. He pointed to Kevin's blue mountain bike. Destroy how? Max looked at Ahmed like he wasn't sure he wanted to get into it. Then with a big exhale, he launched into the story. He laughed when he told it, acted like it hadn't been a big deal, but Ahmed could tell otherwise from the way he fiddled with his hands. Everyone was mad at me, Max said, but I was just being a good friend. He said this defiantly, but at the same time he peered at Ahmed as if he needed him to confirm this. Ahmed didn't hesitate. You are good friend, Max. Love that. I was thinking of something. Uh-oh. The sprinkler's getting me. I'll see you tomorrow, fifth graders. Bye.